Okay, I know the title's a bit clickbaity, and I have been known to use it once or twice myself, but I think it could be doing more harm than good, so hear me out. If, like me, you've experienced many houseplant deaths through root rot, it's so tempting to put it down to overwatering. I've overwatered it, I've given it too much to drink, it couldn't cope with all the water I gave it, I killed it with kindness. What if I told you that by continually putting your plant death down to overwatering might actually be the very thing that's preventing you from keeping your plants alive and allowing them to thrive, and that your fear of giving your indoor plants too much water could be stopping your growing skills from developing further? So stick with me while I explain. So imagine we buy a beautiful houseplant in a decorative pot, we bring it home, we put it where it looks its best. If we're a little bit savvy, we naturally want to know how frequently to water it and how much water to give it. We think, again quite naturally, that there is a definitive answer to that question. This plant needs 150 millilitres of water every 2 days without fail. Now wouldn't that be so easy? Set your alarm, get your measuring jug, get ready, and you're off. But days go by, weeks go by, and something appears to be amiss with our new plant. It grows well at first, but then some of the leaves start to lose turgidity. In other words, they begin to flop, they wilt. So you give it a little bit more water, of course you do. It wilts even further, so you water it even more. Eventually it loses the will to live, so you throw it out, only mildly aware as you do so of the excess water sloshing around in the decorative pot. You scratch your head. I must have overwatered it, you mutter. Sound familiar? In this example, the word overwater might seem to be absolutely appropriate, but it doesn't really help. Would that plant have displayed the same behaviour in its natural habitat had so much water been applied? Highly likely that it wouldn't. It would take what it needs and then the rest would drain away. Nature's winds would dry it up again in no time. So why do I have a problem with constantly using this word overwater? Because the real problem with the example I've just given isn't necessarily the amount of water, it's the assumption that every plant has a certain frequency and amount of water that it needs, and that these factors are fixed. In fact, the opposite is true. Watering depends on many factors, and one of those is that your plant is not in its natural environment. Putting the plant's death down to overwatering won't address that if this hypothetical person buys another plant in the future to try again. So let's dive in a little deeper. What can this hypothetical person do in future to prevent the same fate for his or her plant? Well, let's begin with what happens in nature. Most of our houseplants come from tropical and subtropical places. Although the natural habitats may differ in the details, they generally work as houseplants because where they grow naturally isn't too dissimilar from the average house microclimate. Or is it? In their own habitat, it generally rains, and it rains a lot. They're not called rainforests for nothing. Not only that, it's usually very humid too, a recipe for root rot if I ever heard one. So why don't the plants rot and die from overwatering in their natural habitat? Well, the answer is that by growing them in our house, we haven't actually totally replicated what happens in nature. We grow them in usually lower humidity than they're used to. We grow them with hardly any air movement, hardly any ventilation, and we grow them with their roots constrained in non-porous plastic pots, and then subsequently we encase that in a decorative pot that doesn't allow moisture to drain away at all. Additionally, we grow them in far less light than most of them are used to. It's a wonder any survive at all. Then when you take into account the other variables such as a plant's stages of life, how closely the conditions you've placed it in replicate its natural habitat, and if you live in a temperate place like here in the UK, these conditions will change with the seasons. Once you understand just some of these factors, you're a good way towards understanding why there can't be a fixed rate and fixed amount of water that they need. So now we're at the crux of the matter. We've realised that no one can say how much or how frequent watering should be. It depends on many external factors. So how are we supposed to know? Well, it comes down to closely observing your plants and responding to what they do. Many houseplants prefer to have dry roots for at least some of the time. If your plant won't dry out, then perhaps you need to look at its media that it's planted in. Is it holding on to moisture for too long? Do you need to take it out of the decorative pot and let the air get around the roots? Do you need to transition to a clay pot which will wick the water away from the roots? Maybe the media just isn't well draining enough and you need to change it into something with more earth spaces. You might say, why not just water it less? And you'd have a point. That might work, but it would be a gamble. It would be like saying, I'll give my child the bare minimum they need to survive. We won't pay any attention to the multitude of other factors needed that result in a happy, healthy child. As long as they're clinging on to life, that should be enough. They clearly won't thrive, will they? So using the term overwatering, especially to those new to the world of indoor plants, can mask the real reasons your plants aren't thriving and be a lost opportunity to learn about your plants and their requirements. So the next time you give a plant away and they ask how much should they water it, point them to this video. Well, the thing is, once you grasp these ideas, you'll want to know how to solve many of the indoor plant problems that us growers face, and at this stage you probably don't know what they're going to be. So in order to take your houseplant growing skills to the next level, you can follow the link in the description, head over to my Patreon page where you'll see the many benefits of becoming a channel member and supporter. So for now, I'll see you on the next one. Bye!